Okay, we've been discussing the union of Chalukas Haaretz, and in a sense, we have this long narrative that's going to keep on going, but there are some interruptions. There are some, what you might call, digressive maisim in the middle of the Chalukas Haaretz process that the Sefer Yahushua talks about. One, it's a single story, but part of it is contained in Perek Yudalit, and part of it is contained in Perek Tesvav, and part of it is contained in the book of Shoftim. Now, we already spoke about this a little bit, but today we're going to go over it in more detail. In Perek Yudalit, we find that Yahushua is approached by an old friend, that they go back a long way, Kaleb ben Yefuna. Now, Kaleb ben Yefuna is actually a familiar person to us. Remember that Kaleb and Yahushua were the two of the 12 spies who went out to check Eretz Yisrael in the days of Moshe Rabbeinu, and 10 of the spies came back with a negative report, and the only 2 spies who said that Hashem will take care of us and we will be Menatseach, those who had Emunah, were Yahushua and Kaleb ben Yefuna. And because of the Chet HaMeraglim, it was decreed that the entire generation, anyone who was 20 years old at the time of the Exodus, died out in the desert, except for Kaleb and Yoshua bin Nun. Now, that's not as absolute as that sounds. First of all, there were women who were not nigzer. They did not die in Dor HaMidbar. So some may have died of old age, but there were women who were 20 at the time of the Exodus who did come in. That's Beferish. Rashi brings that Shevet Levi was not Nichlal, because Levi did not send a spy. Shevet Levi was not Nichlal in the Dor HaMidbar. And there's even a Shita in Taisvis, in Maseches Tainis, that say up to 15,000 people may have entered. Because what happened was this, again, a little bit of a digression. You'll recall the last Mishnah in Maseches Tainis says that the 15th of Av was the happiest day. That and Yom Kippur were the 2 happiest days of the Jewish calendar. And the Gemara gives a lot of reasons, but one reason that's given is on the 15th of Av, the deaths of the Dor HaMidbar stopped. The Gemara does not explain what that means, but Rashi brings from the Yerushalmi a lengthy explanation, and that is that the generation of the desert died over a 40-year period. Actually, it was 38 years. And they would dig their graves every 9th of Av. They would dig their graves, or they dig the 8th of Av, and they would sleep in their graves the night of Tisha B'Av. And anybody who had reached their 60th birthday in the past year did not wake up the next morning. In other words, the entire Dor HaMidbar had to experience this symbolic death experience on Tisha B'Av, but nobody died before 60, which means to say the people that were just 20 years old at the time of the Exodus, they died in the last year. People that were already 60 died the first year. Now, nobody died before 60. Now, the numbers actually do not work out here, because the truth is there were not 40 years of deaths. There were only 38 Tisha B'Avs that people died. So you do have a problem of how to work out the numbers. But the general concept is that if you took a population base of 600,000 men from 20 up, and you look at it in terms of an average, that actually means 15,000 people died every year. And it got smaller and smaller and smaller, obviously. So when you're number 40, you only had 15,000, again, going with the averages, you only have 15,000 people left of the old generation. Everybody else is the new generation. So the Yerushalmi says, the last Tisha B'Av, they dug their graves, and they expected that they were going to die. And lo and behold, they woke up the next morning, and they were alive. So they figured, well, maybe it's not the 9th of Av, maybe it's too early. So they kept on sleeping in their graves. the 10th, the 11th, the 12th, the 13th, the 14th. On the 15th, they saw a new moon. A full moon. So they knew the 9th of Av passed. So according to the Talmud Yerushalmi, what that means was Hashem gave an amnesty to the last group that would have died in the Midbar, allowing them, B'pashtus, to enter Eretz Yisrael. This is how the Yerushalmi seems to learn, which is an absolute pella, because the Torah says over and over again that the only two men of the old generation who entered Eretz Yisrael were Yahushua and Kaleb. According to the Talmud Yerushalmi, it's Yahushua and Kaleb and 15,000 of their closest friends, because that is the simcha of the 15th of Av, that Hashem annulled for the last group of people the gezerah of death in the desert. It's a very shver Yerushalmi, but in terms of the Bavli, many learn the Bavli differently. When it says the gezerah was over, it means it was the last year, meaning the last group of people did die. The gezerah is over. They sat Shiva for the Mesei Midbar, and Shiva is over on the 15th of Av, meaning it's not that some miracle happened. It means that we were able to sit Shiva and mourn those who died, and then we could go on. So, at least like one sheet of that Taisa Springs, based on the Yerushalmi, 15,000 people did enter. Now, some people learn, and I consider this a bizarre pshat, but some do learn this way. Well, yes, the 15,000 people didn't die on Tisha B'Av, but they died between Tisha B'Av and Yahushua entering Eretz Yisrael, so they didn't enter Eretz Yisrael. I don't know. I mean, so is that going to be a reason why the 15th of Av should be a simcha? Oh, it's a great simcha. They didn't die. Well, maybe the musar is, if you live a few extra months, maybe that counts as well. But there are those who actually learn that for Shtetzach they died before they entered Eretz Yisrael, but they didn't die on the 9th of Av. And we didn't know that. Again, we didn't know that till the 15th of Av. In other words, the simcha, according to the Yerushalmi, of the 15th of Av is, we now know Hashem spared us on the Tisha B'Av. Right? That's how it works. Yeah.
Could the missing deaths also be explained by death in other ways? Like after the men who were with the Midianite women who died, or people who died for other reasons, be considered, an extension of the Chet Meraglim?
Yeah, I mean, you are correct. There were many people, thousands of people who died for other reasons, and that would be nichal. That would also go into the count of the Dor HaMidbar. Yeah, you are correct on that. Yeah.
Hashem can annul bad decrees, right?
Yes.
So it could be that if he says a bad thing has happened, it doesn't have to happen.
Well, it's a little difficult. I mean, the Rambam lays down the rule that if a Navi tells you b'Shem Hashem that something bad will happen, it can always be changed. The question is, do you even apply that to the Torah itself? Meaning, how far do you say that? Meaning, okay, it's one thing, a Navi tells you something, right, it can be changed. But the Torah is literally the word of Hashem. So there is a big shaila whether the lumdus that the Rambam says over and over again, that negative nevuos can be changed, could that be applied even to the Torah? I think it would be a little bit of a chiddush to say that it would, but again, that may be a possibility. Okay, but putting that question aside, though, let's just go with Pashat Pshat, that Yahushua and Kaleb are the only two survivors of the old generation, and the Chumash mentions that on their reconnaissance spy mission to check out Eretz Yisrael, Kaleb, doesn't say Yahushua, Kaleb went to Hebron to be mispalel at the kever of the avos of Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, right? Abraham, Sarah, right? Yitzchak, Rivka, Yaakov, Leah, Adam and Chava, right? That the four pairs are buried in Maras HaMachpelah. And Kaleb went to be mispalel that HaKadosh Baruch Hu should give him the strength not to give in to the evil counsel of the Meraglim. It does not say Yahushua went. Kaleb went. Kaleb went. Maybe Yeshua felt he didn't have to go because Moshe gave him a special bracha. Remember, Moshe changed Hoshea's name to Yehoshua, that Hashem, Ka, Yud and Hey, Hashem should save you from the eights of the Meraglim. But Kaleb went to Hebron. And here, Kaleb says for the first time, now it does not say in the Chumash that Moshe made some promise to Kaleb to give him Hebron. All it says was, Hashem said Yeshua and Kaleb are going to live and enter the land. But here, you only know this from Sefer Yehoshua. Kaleb actually tells Yehoshua that Moshe Rabbeinu promised me Hebron, because that is where I went to David. You don't know that from you actually do not know that from the Chumash, but this is what Kaleb is saying. We assume Kaleb is not a liar, right? So Yeshua made a deal with Kaleb to give him Hebron. Now, let me just mention a few things about Kaleb that might be interesting. Kaleb was married twice. Kaleb's first wife was none other than Miriam. Kaleb married Miriam. Now, Kaleb was much, much, much younger than Miriam. We know this because Kaleb was 40 years old at the time of the Meraglim. Miriam is 6 years older than Moshe Rabbeinu. Again, let's figure this out. We know Moshe Rabbeinu took the Jews out of Mitzrayim when he was 80. So at the time of Yetzias Mitzrayim, Miriam was 86. The Shiluach HaMeraglim took place 2 years later. So Kaleb was 38, Miriam was 86. By the time of the Meraglim, Kaleb is 40, Miriam is 88 years old. So Kaleb married a woman that was 48 years older than him. And Chazal in Maseches Saita actually describe that Kaleb marrying Miriam was actually an act of chesed. Miriam, besides the fact that she was old, but she was kind of an old maid, she was very sickly, she was very weak, not attractive because of her health issues. And Kaleb married her l'shem shamayim, and she became beautiful and youthful. And in a sense, that's why in Divrei Hayamim, which has many obscure verses, Kaleb, under a different name, there are all sorts of pseudonyms, is described as the father of Miriam under a different name. Because in a sense, he was like her father. He nursed her back to health and brought out bechitzonius, obviously, the inner beauty and righteousness that Miriam had, that it would be manifest even in her physical self. So Kaleb married Miriam. Kaleb married Miriam. And it seems to be they had a child, which is kind of a miracle. She was 86 or 88. And that child was Chur. So Chur, who was Miriam's child, Chur got killed at the Chet HaEgel. Chur got killed at the Chet HaEgel. So they suffered a bereavement. But Chur was the child of Miriam and Kaleb. Now, Miriam, we know, died in the desert. Moshe died in the desert. Moshe was the last one to die, but Miriam died, Aaron died. Moshe, Aaron, Miriam, they all died. So Kaleb not only lost a son, but Kaleb lost a wife, of course, who was much, much older than him. But then he married a second wife. And the second wife he married is even more unusual. He married a woman who was born not Jewish. She was born an Egyptian. She converted to Judaism. None other than Bitya Baspara. You'll notice I say Bitya, right? Most of us say the name is Batya. In fact, that's the more common name. The common girl's name is Batya. It's hard to know why that became the common pronunciation. because in Divrei Hayamim and the like, she is Bitya Bas Paro. So Bitya is actually her name. And Bitya was the Egyptian princess who had Moshe Rabbeinu retrieved from the Nile, and she raised him along with Yocheved, his real mother. Bitya, in fact, is the one that gave Moshe Rabbeinu his name. It's hard to know what that means as well. What does it say? She called him Moshe because min hamayim mishisehu, he was pulled out from the water. Is Moshe a Hebrew name or is it an Egyptian name? What does it mean? She called him the Egyptian word for pulling him out from the water, and the Torah translates that into Hebrew? That's hard to do because that would mean you'd have the same punning thing, right? In other words, the Egyptian word for drawing would correspond to the Egyptian name for Moshe, and it happens to be the same in Hebrew. Puns are normally not translatable from language to language. So that itself is a little bit of a mudna, a strange thing. What, did she give him a Hebrew name based on this or an Egyptian name that the Chumash translates? But be it as it may, Bitya must have been older than even Miriam. Miriam was only 6 when Moshe was born. Bitya, we don't know exactly, but Bitya seems to be older. She's old enough to kind of raise a child. Was she 14? Was she 20? We don't know, but it seems pretty pashut. I don't know if you have a raya 100%. She was older than 6. So Kaleb's second wife was even older than Miriam, and she had the zechus of entering Eretz Yisrael. Kaleb entered Eretz Yisrael married to Bitya Bas Paro. So both Yahushua and Kaleb have interesting shidduchim. Kaleb, second marriage, was Bitya Bas Paro, and Yahushua, we don't know if this was his first marriage. So Yahushua was an older bachelor already, right? Because how old is Yahushua now? Yahushua is 80, because he was 40 at the time of the miracle. Okay, be it as it may, Yahushua's wife was Rachav Hazaina. Rachav, right? So Kaleb is Bitya Bas Paro, Yahushua is Rachav Hazaina. Okay, so that's just a little bit to be aware of Kaleb's marriage partners, the 2 marriages that Kaleb had. And he comes to Yahushua, and he says, don't you remember what Moshe Rabbeinu said about us? In other words, he's reminding Yahushua of the deal that I'm supposed to get Hebron as my place. And Kaleb says, I was 40 years old when Moshe sent us to be spies, and now I have been here. It is 45 years later. This is how we know, by the way, this is how Chazal figure out. Remember, we said many, many times that the years of conquest were 7 years of conquest. Rashi tells us the proof of the 7 years of conquest is the following. Kaleb says he was 40 years old at the time of the spies. The Jewish people wandered in the desert 38 years, not 40 years. It was 40 years from the Exodus, but in terms of the Meraglim till they entered Eretz Yisrael was 38 years. So that actually means Kaleb was 78 years old when they crossed the Yarden. 40 plus 38. Kaleb now says, before the Chalukat Haaretz, which is after the years of conquest, that he is 85 years old. So if he was 78 when we crossed the Yarden, and after the wars he is 85, right? What does that prove? That the period of warfare was 7 years, because 78 plus 7 is 85. So the source of the idea that the years of Milchama were 7 years is because Kaleb says it has been 45 years since he was sent as a spy, and he was 40 years old then. And now Kaleb says he is 85 years old. And in Perek Yudalev, Pasuk Yudalev, he says something that all of us could hope for. Odeini hayom chazak. I am just as vigorous and strong as I was many, many years ago. Kikochi az, kikochi ata. My strength then is like my strength now. Of course, he means spiritually, but the simple meaning of the pasuk is he is actually describing being very vigorous, very energetic, very capable. I can still do stuff. Therefore, he asks Yahushua, give me the mountains around Hebron so I can vanquish the giants. Remember, Hebron had the giants that lived there. In fact, again, a little point. It says here, and it's also in the Chumash, that Hebron's original name, in fact, it's in the Chumash itself, was called Kiryat Arba. Now, don't confuse it with modern Israeli names. Today, there is the city of Hebron that's largely Arab, except for incredibly courageous and maybe crazy, well, I shouldn't say that, people who actually live in Hebron. Hebron is a very dangerous place to live. But right adjacent to Hebron is a beautiful, large Jewish city called Kiryat Arba that has fences and walls around it. So today there is Hebron, which has the Maras HaMachpelah, which is mainly Arab. And then there's Kiryat Arba, which is a separate city right next to Hebron. But in reality, Kiryat Arba was the original name of Hebron. That's what it says in Chai Sarah. V'Tomas Sarah b'Kiryas Arba he Hebron. Sarah died in Kiryas Arba, which is Hebron. So the question becomes, what is the meaning of the words Kiryas Arba? So we actually have three explanations why Hebron was called Kiryas Arba. Explanation number one is Arba means four, and that is because in Hebron are buried 4 holy pairs in Ma'aras HaMachpelah. Right? We have, again, Adam and Chava, Avraham and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, and Yaakov and Leah. Rachel is not buried there. Rachel is buried in Beis Lechem. Now, it's interesting, though, that even though I think this is the most common explanation, Kiryat Arba is merumaz to Ma'aras HaMachpelah, in the one place where the Torah uses the word Kiryat Arba, it almost doesn't make sense. It says, Sarah died in Kiryat Arba, that is Hebron. I mean, when Sarah died, it was not Kiryat Arba because there was only one pair that was buried in Ma'aras. I mean, when Sarah died, the only people that were buried in Ma'aras HaMachpelah were Adam and Chava. So how could the Torah say Sarah died in Kiryat Arba? It wasn't Kiryat Arba yet. So you have to say something like, well, Moshe Rabbeinu wrote down the Torah from Hashem at Har Sinai or wherever he wrote it down. So by the time he wrote it down, it was Kiryat Arba, meaning he is referring to what the city became known as, even though it was not known that way at the time. Okay, that's shaykh. Sometimes the Torah will use a future designation, even though that was not the designation at the time. So that's pshat number one. Kiryat Arba means the city of the 4 pairs. Interpretation number 2 is Hebron was inhabited by Canaanite giants. Now, as I told you before, the idea of giants does not have to refer to Jack and the Beanstalk giants, although maybe, yeah, it doesn't mean, 50-foot monsters or whatever it would be. I mean, a giant could simply be, Baron Trump is a giant, whatever it would be. In other words, they were very tall people. They were unusually tall, and as a result, they were frightening. Okay, so a giant doesn't have to be, all the way to the sky. Now, it's true that Midrashim describe Og Melech HaBashan, right? It says, Moshe Rabbeinu was 20 amos high. 40 feet high. And Moshe Rabbeinu only reached the ankle of Og Melech HaBashan, right? But again, the Maral explains that these are metaphors and spiritual descriptions. They're not really referring to physical reality. In fact, you can almost see that from the Torah itself. When the Torah described how giant Og was, it says, behold, his bed is 9 amos long. Now, an amma is anywhere between 1.5 feet and 2 feet. So let's even go with 2 feet. He had a bed that was 18 feet long. Now that's a big bed. But the point is, even if you say he's 18 feet, that's way, way shorter than Chazal. Right? So it's clear the Chumash is not describing a 50-foot, 100-foot person. Okay, so whatever it is, we're not mechuyev to take anak in the most literal sense. But be it as it may, Hebron did have fearsome, very, very tall, warlike people. And there were 4 giants in particular that were the bad guys. The first one, his name was Arba. Now, why he was called Arba, we don't know. It was a Canaanite name. And Arba had 3 sons, Achiman, Sheshan, Talmai. And these 3 sons lived all the way back from the time of the Meraglim till this time. And therefore it's called Kiryat Arba. It is the city of the giant Arba, whose sons, Achiman, Sheshan, and Talmai, were the ones who were generating Pachad in Hebron. So that's a second explanation. Now the third explanation is very similar, but it looks at Arba not as a name, but as a number, meaning a father and 3 sons, meaning we don't know the father's name, but there was the father and the 3 giants. So it's Kiryat Arba, the city of the 4 giants. Okay, so Kiryat Arba is either the 4 Zugais in Moras HaMachpelah, or Arba, the giant, who had Achiman, Sheshai, and Talmai, or Arba means not a person, but the city of the 4 giants. Again, Arba, it wouldn't be Arba, but the father, like this shot, you don't know the father's name. The father and the 3 giants, Achiman, Sheshai, and Talmai. So Kaleb says to Yahushua, listen, Moshe Rabbeinu promised me Hebron, but I'm not going to make Bnei Yisrael conquer it, because that would be private gain. I'm not going to use the national army for my piece of territory, but I will arrange my own forces, so to speak, and we will conquer, we will vanquish Hebron. And the pasuk says that Yahushua gave him permission to do so. Now, it doesn't say in Perek Yudal that he did it, just he was given permission by Moshe Rabbeinu. I'm sorry, he was given permission by Yahushua to vanquish Hebron. Now, Perek Tesvav, the next Perek, goes on and gives us more of the story. This is Perek Tesvav, Pasuk Yud Gimel. Ula Kaleb ben Yefuneh, Nasan Chelek b'soch b'nei Yehuda. Kaleb ben Yefuneh, who was from the tribe of Yehuda, did have land within the tribe of Yehuda, because Hebron happens to be located in the Chelek of Yehuda. And he was given Kiryat Arba, Avi Ha'anaki Hebron, and Kaleb expelled from there actually means he killed the three sons of the giant, who are also giants, Sheshai, Achimai, Achiman, and Talmai. Now, again, I just want to remind you of the following. In the book of Shoftim, this story is repeated, but it indicates that Kaleb didn't actually do it till after the death of Yahushua. So this is kind of an example of Ein Mukta Mamucher B'Torah. In Perek Yud Daled, Yahushua gave him permission, but the conquest that is described in Perek Tesvav actually is an event that occurred after Yahushua died. You wouldn't know that here, because here in Sefer Yahushua it just reports that Kaleb conquered Hebron, but in fact the book of Shoftim says that was afterwards. Hebron was not conquered in the days of Yahushua. Now, then it gives us a little further point. The name of Hebron was Kiryat Arba, okay? But then Kaleb wanted to get an adjacent city, which apparently was part of what he was granted, and that adjacent city next to Hebron was a Canaanite city called Devir, and Devir also had an older name, Kiryat Sefer. Again, it's not the same as the modern, but this is where the names come from. The city of the book. Now, this is a little peculiar. The Canaanites, weren't even like the Greeks. The Greeks were into literature and fine art and everything else. The Canaanites tended not to be particularly cultured in those areas. So it's a little odd why a Canaanite city would be called the city of the book. We'll come back to why that's so. Chazal have a drasha. So, Kaleb's first conquest, now remember, all of this is after the death of Yahushua, is Hebron, which is Kiryat Arba. His second conquest is going to be Devir, which is Kiryat Sefer. But Kaleb cannot do it on his own. So Kaleb says, anyone who vanquishes the Canaanites in Kiryat Sefer, I will give him Achsa, my daughter, as a wife. Anybody who could conquer Devir gets to marry my daughter. And it then says, a man called Othniel ben Kenaz, who is the brother of Kaleb, we'll discuss that in a moment, managed to conquer Devir, which is Kiryat Sefer, and Kaleb kept his promise. He gave him, Othniel ben Kenaz, Achsa, Kaleb's daughter, became the wife of Othniel ben Kenaz. Now here it does say Beferish, Othniel ben Kenaz was the brother of Kaleb. So the Gemara in Saita asks the obvious question, how could Othniel ben Kenaz be Kaleb's brother? Kaleb's father is Yefuneh, Kaleb ben Yefuneh. Othniel's father is Kenaz. So the Gemara says, there are actually two versions in the Gemara, that they were either step-brothers or half-brothers, meaning to say, when Kaleb's father died, Othniel is much younger than Kaleb. Keep it on. Othniel is much, much younger than Kaleb. Right? Kaleb is 85. And if you add the number of years till Yahushua died, he might be in his 90s already. Othniel is young, but what happened was that when Kaleb's father, Yefuneh, died, his mother remarried a man called Kenaz, a Jewish man called Kenaz, and Othniel was either born from Kaleb's mother, so that would make them half-brothers from the same mother, or possibly it was a stepchild, meaning Othniel was from another wife, but Kaleb is called his brother because they are step-brothers. So it's either a step-brother or a half-brother. They do not share a father. They either share a mother or they don't even share a mother. So, be it as it may, though, Othniel is certainly allowed to marry Achsa, because even if Othniel is a half-brother, even if Othniel is a full brother, right? A brother can marry his brother's child, meaning an uncle can marry a niece. In fact, this is, I guess most of you have not learned Yevamos. Some of you might have learned Mishnayos Yevamos, right? But this is how Maseches Yevamos begins, right? The very, very confusing laws of an erva falling liyibam. But let's take this very simple example. A brother marries his niece, right? I'm allowed to marry my niece. And then the brother dies without children. So his wife falls liyibam in front of her father. So what's supposed to happen here? Is the father supposed to be miyabem, his daughter? So, Baruch Hashem, the answer is no. This is a well-known halacha. It's the first Mishnah in Yevamos, that if the Yavama is an erva to the Yavam, he's not allowed to do Yibam. And not only is he not allowed to do Yibam, she doesn't even need chalitza. In other words, she doesn't even need the release ceremony of taking off the shoe. There is no relationship whatsoever. Not only that, but the Mishnah is then mechadesh that an erva even paters etzara. Now, etzara is a term for a co-wife, probably because they cause trouble for each other. And that is the following. Let's say Reuven has a brother Shimon. Reuven marries Shimon's daughter, but Reuven has other wives too. Now, theoretically, when Reuven dies without children, it's true that Shimon cannot be miyabim his daughter, but can Shimon be miyabim the other wives who are not related? Or if he's not miyabim them, does he give them chalitza? So the yesod of the first Mishnah in Yevamos is that not only is an erva excluded from yibam and chalitza, but the erva even exempts the co-wives. So none of these women need yibam or chalitza, and the term for the other women is they are called a tsoras erva. A co-wife of an erva has the same exemption from chalitza and yibam as the erva herself. Yeah.
But not for you, but your brother's wife would also be erva. Which I wouldn't even think to say that all erva would be.
Yeah. So you are correct. Technically, a brother's wife is also an erva. It's a very good question. But there, the Torah says it's only an erva if there are children, meaning the isser of a brother's wife when there are no children, it's not an erva. In other words, that's not an erva. Okay. All right. But be as it may, therefore, there is absolutely no problem with Othniel marrying, even if it would have been his niece, even if Kaleb would have been his brother, and certainly according to the view of Chazal, that this was a step-sibling relationship, there surely would be no particular problem. So this is part one of this story, right? And that is Kaleb's conquest of Kiryat Arba, which is Hebron, and Othniel ben Kenaz's conquest of Devir, which is Kiryat Sefer, and his marriage to Achsa. So he was both Kaleb's half-brother, stepbrother, and Kaleb's son-in-law. Chazal have a drasha. Why is her name Achsa? Right? Why? So again, it's a symbolic meaning. It has the same letters as kas, anger, because anyone that looked at her got angry at his wife because she was so beautiful that everybody else felt they got stuck with whatever they had. So it was a little dangerous for other people, shalom bayis, and the like. Now we're going to see next week. We're going to see a further story about Othniel ben Kenaz. Let me just remind you, Othniel ben Kenaz actually turns out to be the successor to Yahushua ben Nun. After Yahushua ben Nun dies, we enter a new period of time, a new book, the book of Shoftim, the book of Judges. These are the leaders of the Jewish people before we had a monarchy. And the very first shofet is Othniel ben Kenaz, who is Kaleb's son-in-law. Okay, so we'll talk more about Othniel ben Kenaz next time. Good. Pray L'cha Chanukah.
Thank you for listening to this Awesome Erech production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.